Hi, everyone. Welcome back to a new episode of Emerging Brands Podcast with Kelly Bennett. I'm your host. I'm a New York City brand strategist, New York City based brand strategist, and I love working with food and beverage, home and lifestyle brands. And I also love talking with founders and CEOs building emerging brands. Today's guest is Aaron Luell. He is the CEO of Mercado Famous. And this is an emerging food and beverage brand that I'm stoked to learn more about. We had to pause talking prior to recording because I wanted to get this on video and audio. So, Aaron, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
I'm super excited, Kelly. It's going to be a great conversation.
Love it. So I know a little bit about your background, just looking on your site and hearing just a little bit before we hit record. And your brand story, just going into just your background of being living in Spain and your grandparents moving to Spain from China and opening up restaurants. I would love to hear a little bit more of your background prior to even starting your brand.
Yeah, no, it's been a journey. And we joke around amongst ourselves with my family or even my co-founder that I think one day we will sit down and write a book about this because
Love that.
it's been a fun ride. So yeah, so I'm Chinese, right? I was born and raised for the first 9 years of my life in Shanghai, China.
Oh, okay.
And then moved to Madrid, Spain, for elementary school, middle school, high school. And my family, or my grandfather, was one of the first Chinese to establish themselves in Spain. So
Wow.
Spain, back in the 60s and 70s, was not really an immigrant country, unlike the U.S., where the entire country is built based on immigrants from overseas. Spain was very much a Catholic country, with not a lot of diversity back in those days. So, when my grandfather moved there, really there was no more than probably 100 Chinese overall living in Spain,
Wow.
and
Within
and it
the
was
whole country?
within the whole country, yeah, probably. And I'm kind of exaggerating probably with 100. I don't know the specific numbers, but
Wow.
it just felt like there were two of us, or two of them
Wow. Yeah,
back
yeah,
then.
yeah.
So he was a lawyer. He learned Spanish. He had a huge affinity for Spanish culture, Spanish language, and studied law. And because he was one of the first, and because he understood the local laws, he helped many entrepreneurs, that are Chinese that went to Spain to start different businesses. So that's a little bit of his background, and of course, over
Right.
time, he brought his entire family out. And then, my story a little bit is, I finished high school in Spain, came to the States for college, fell in love with States, and kind of stayed afterwards with, business school and college. And, I actually wanted to really spend 10 years of my life, or, a good portion of my life, learning about how to run businesses in a Western way, if you may.
Mm-hmm.
So, even though my family have always been entrepreneurs, they were primarily in fashion, which is the other brand that we manage and own. I knew I wanted to not come back to the family business, not to start my own brand right away, but really spend a good chunk of my time learning about how to properly manage businesses, right, in a very rigorous way. So I joined the Fortune 500 company, General Electric, spent about a decade with them, and loved every second of it. And I was fortunate enough to be given leadership positions in a number of different functions: technology, operations, finance, merger and acquisitions. And it was a blast. It was a blast just because it allowed me to travel the world, allowed me to see different businesses within the company, and most importantly, allowed me to really understand what is it like to run businesses, in a very effective and efficient way. So that's the boring stuff. That's kind
No,
of the
I find that really interesting. And I love that you just touched upon operations of really cutting your teeth in different ways to operate, and also culturally how different ways to operate businesses and building that experience. And also you touched upon saying that you didn't want to go into the family business, which I'm sure
It was
was a thing. I'm gonna guess that that was, you know, also a big moment. So you really, what it sounds like, set out in your own, you know, coming to the States, staying in the States, working for a Fortune 500 company. So taking that leap, it sounds like, also on yourself and investing in yourself. What then prompted you to then say, okay, it's time for me to start my own brand now?
Yeah, it was something that's always in my mind, right? So the
Right.
entire 10-year or 10 plus year that I was with GE, not like every second of it, I was thinking about, oh, I can't wait to leave and start running
Right.
my own brand, because I literally enjoy every second I spend with that company. I can't speak highly enough of, I mean, the company is a different spot today, but the learning they've given me was, priceless, right? So really enjoyed it, but at the same time, I knew I've always wanted to at one point take the leap.
Mhm.
So back in 2013, when I finally left the company, I didn't start Mercado Famous right away. So I met my co-founder, Carmen Chen Wu, who also happens to be Chinese, born in Valencia, which is on the coast. It's a coastal city of Spain, but also Chinese. And we actually later found out that our grandparents actually did business together. That
Wow.
I know her grandmother was also one of the earlier Chinese immigrants to Spain, and she was an entrepreneur herself and started a bunch of different ventures, restaurants and Chinese schools, and so on and so forth. So we later found out that my grandfather actually helped her in a number of her ventures, and actually did business together, which is
That
wild.
is wild.
I know, fate.
Wow.
I used to not believe in things like fate or luck or
Serendipity.
yeah, but life, there's a way to make things happen. And
Mhm.
we kind of joke around and say back then, 2013, when Carmen and I, kind of found each other and started Cara, which is our first venture together, which is a high-end luxury handbag brand.
Mm.
Um, what are the odds, right? That me wanted to get back to the family business, which is fashion, wanted to start a handbag brand specifically. And Carmen, who is also a CFDA awarded fashion designer in handbags specifically, who always had the dream of starting her own brand, and happens to be Chinese from Spain. I mean, like it's like all these things coming together. It's
Wow.
like, wow, how did this happen, right? Um, so that's kind of a little bit of backstory how I
Yeah.
met my co-founder.
Yeah.
And we were one of the early DTC brands, together with brands like Warby Parker, Away,
Mhm.
Glossier, and so on and so forth.
Mhm.
And it was a great ride. I mean, the brand's been around for 7+ years now. We're known for high-end functional handbags. The thesis behind Cara was always that we felt that there's a lot of luxury brands out there. So LV, Prada, Gucci, you name it, right? But we wanted to bring a functional aspect to our bags, which means multi-strap system, lightweight, different pockets, thoughtful pockets, organization kits. So anyway, so that's kind of the brand that we started back in 2013. And about 2.5 years ago, during the pandemic or the thick of the
Mhm.
pandemic, we started to think about what's the next step for us, not just for the brand, because Cara is growing. If anything, it's growing faster than ever, right? But what else can we do? What are the passions that we have? And back then we started to help other entrepreneurs. We started, looking at putting angel investments in some projects that we've known, and so on and so forth. And we kind of looked at each other as like, hey, why not invest in ourselves? And
Mm.
we started thinking about what are some of the things that we love, and we keep going back or coming back to the concept of Spanish food. And so the whole thing we joke around is like really was born out of passion and out of necessity or lack of good options, if you may, right? Because the way we looked at it was every year when we go back to Spain, the number one thing we used to bring back is jamon, chorizo, basically Spanish charcuterie, just because
Mhm.
you just couldn't get really good quality charcuterie or Spanish charcuterie in the States. Either you overpay for really good quality, which it will cost you an arm and a leg, or you pay something that we call export grade quality, which is not bad, but you end up still paying premium for a product that's like not really
Not
premium quality.
as quality. Yeah.
Exactly, taste wise, or the quality of the meat, or the way the pigs are raised, and so on and so forth. So, and so we start looking into it. It's like, hey, can we actually try to, and I hate this term disruption, but disrupt the category a little bit, right? Because the reality is that the Italian charcuterie, it's heavily penetrated in the American pantry, right? We looked at the numbers. 78% of the American household, whoever's doing the grocery shopping, recognizes, what a salami is, what a chorizo is, or what a prosciutto is, and so on and so forth. But so we knew that the taste profile is there, right? That salty, meaty flavor is something that I think a lot of American consumers love, because data is showing that they're aware of them, they're consuming it through the Italian side of things. But
Right.
we were just kind of surprised and see how the Spanish charcuterie are not as heavily penetrated. And there's a lot of reasons why. I think the Italian immigration population, was established in the States a lot stronger earlier than the Spaniards. Also, if you look at the history of the kind of the Italian food, how they first came to the States after the major immigrations, they all came in as a category versus a brand. So, like, for example, olive oil, Italian olive oil, right? You probably don't know that many Italian olive oil brands, but Italian olive oil. So that's the distinction, is that they came in the States as a category versus coming in with very, sporadic brands.
That's a really good point. So they came in really marketing, this is our product
That's right.
overall, this is our
That's right.
category,
That's
versus
right.
going into individual brands.
Yep, exactly. So the Spanish didn't do that, right? The Spanish, we if you look at how they attempted in the past coming into the States, didn't come in as, hey, here's our charcuterie, but more as, here's brand A, here's brand B, here's brand C. So they were not as unified as the Italians did. So those are some of the reasons why we kind of understood why the category wasn't as penetrated as the Italians. But the data does show that the taste profile, or the demand, right,
Is
of
there.
is exactly. And the last thing we saw is that the conversation around the Spanish charcuterie, or the narrative around the Spanish charcuterie, was very stale to a certain extent. Everything felt very Boar's Head. Everything felt very Oscar Mayer. And God bless. I mean, nothing against any of those brands. There's a huge market for it, and for good reasons. But we just felt that for the customers that we are trying to service, right, the millennials, the Gen Zs, and everybody,
Right.
else, that we wanted something that's a little bit less stale. And what that means is, you don't need to put your white glove, you don't need to go chase your Chateau 90, whatever, like glass of fancy wine, to enjoy these particular meats. Yes, the pricing commands itself, as far as like, we do bring very high quality premium product, right? So it's not going to be quote unquote cheap, but you don't need a very expensive decor, or very, you don't need to go out of the way to really enjoy this meat. Our whole thing is that this is a vehicle to really tell the Spanish story, which is using the food to gather people together, right? So, hey, crack a Bud Light, grab a piece of white bread, or pita, or whatever you have around. It doesn't really matter how you consume it, as long as you consume with your loved ones, your friends, your family, and so on and so forth. So, so that was the thesis, Kelly, in terms of how we initially thought about the brand. And off we go. We started the brand about a year and a half, 2 years ago. It was launched a year and a half, 2 years ago. We really wanted to find the right farm to work with us. That was a very important thing for Carmen and I. We didn't want to go, and work with, any industrialized supplier, right? And the challenge, actually, in the early days, was to find a supplier that shared our values, but kind of was big enough to actually sustain our demand. Because we did find a really great set of farmers, right, that raised the pig the right way, sacrificed the pig the right way, and even cured and prepared the pig the right way. But they had 30 pigs. What am I going to do with 30 pigs? You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
it's I need enough product to sustain our growth. So it was that very fine balance between not to go too small, because even though we love their values, can't really sustain our growth, versus not to go too mega, right? Super, super large, because you know that because of the efficiency they try to gain, they're cutting corners somewhere. And we've seen a lot of that. So long story short, we landed on a supplier who we extremely proud of. It's a 3-generation family, 100+ year old farm, and that can trace the lineage of their pig to, I think, over 12 generations, in terms of like where the pig actually comes from. The industry of Spanish charcuterie, Iberico specifically, it's extremely regulated by the Spanish government. So, you can imagine, right? It's a very priced, high value meat. So a lot of bad actors in the past have tried to cheat the consumers by calling it Iberico when they were not. So the Spanish government actually did a really good thing by regulating this industry, by actually demanding specific documentation around the DNA and the lineage of your pig if you can claim Iberico. So, all of that actually was all properly in place. We love the taste of it. It was cured not in the fridge; it's cured literally in a cave in the northwest part of Spain. So great product, couldn't be more proud of. And yeah, we're in the mission to basically share this wonderful product from Spain with the American pantry. And the cool thing I think that we bring to the table, not only just to bring the best of Spain or to share a little bit of Spain with the American consumers, but it's also bring a little bit of that global perspective into the equation, right?
Right, with your unique background too.
Exactly. Because of our Chinese background, funny enough, like Carmen and I talk about this all the time. Back when we were living in Spain, we see our parents and grandparents actually use these kind of ingredients, local ingredients from Spain, to cook Chinese food. Sometimes because we couldn't really get some ingredients from China, right? So for instance, there's this great soup that my mom used to make or still makes called 烟多鲜. It's basically a stew, has bamboo in there, has wintermelon in there, has bone broth, but a unique ingredient that always calls for is a piece of cured ham. And in China, of course, you can get a cured ham, but the specific cured ham that we're looking for in Spain or from China when we were living in Spain didn't exist. Or like you couldn't really easily buy it in supermarkets. So instead, we actually use jamon, and to give that umami flavor into the soup. So that's just some ways, right, that you're incorporating, local meats, delicacies like the jamon into, an Asian dish.
Right.
And so when you look at our recipes and our content on social media and so on and so forth, that's mainly a lot of the content we share is that, hey, you can consume it as is, like we do it in Spain, right? With a glass of wine, glass of beer, whatever you want to consume with. But hey, you can actually cook with it too. You can put it on pizza. You can put it on fried rice. You can make an omelet with it. You can eat it with fried French fries. There's a lot of different applications that you can use this for versus just like eating it as is, which is kind of the traditional way. So yeah, so that's a little background. I
did notice that on your social. It looks really fun. And I personally don't eat meat. However, my girlfriend loves a good charcuterie moment. And I was showing her your social, and literally we were at a coffee shop and she said, just hold on, send me that link. And I said, "Oh, you want me to send it now?" She said, I need you to send me that link. That looks amazing. And it really, when I know that like something catches her eye, because she's very much a foodie. She has a background being a chef, and just her caliber of quality. She's always my barometer of who I test, new products with. And she literally was like, send me the link right now. Don't worry about your coffee. I will pick it up at the counter. I need you to give me the link. And so that was like my barometer of like, okay, cool. This is like something really caught her eye of what you're doing. And I would just say from a brand perspective, I got this sense, again, without even knowing exactly the background, it was very much giving like this third culture perspective on food and feeling that fusion and making it feel really fun and modern. The branding is beautiful, the color palette, I love a royal blue or
I
electric
saw.
blue.
Yeah.
So that really caught my eye too, and I was like, ooh, this just looks interesting, right? Like the storytelling, the way that your layout is, it just feels very approachable also, which
And,
is
and
nice.
and that was the goal. I thank you for noticing all that. I
Yeah.
think, we designed the brand at the end of the day with a lot of that intention as far as like what the story we want to tell and
Mhm.
and who we want to talk to, right? It's very, for lack of definition, I think we call it very Brooklyn. It's
Well, she's from Brooklyn, so there you
oh, there
go.
you go. There you go. There you go. So we should go, we
Yeah.
should go there. But it's the non-apologetic attitude, right? It's
Mhm.
that like I don't need to be fancy, but I still care about premium product.
Quality.
Exactly, right? It's being quote unquote cool without trying too hard. It's all of
Mhm.
those things
All those
combined.
things.
And at the end of the day, back to my earlier point, our success is not being measured how much meat we can sell, right? I think we always say internally one of our own KPIs that you kind of measure ourselves, intangible
Mhm.
KPIs, is when a customer starting to buy our product, not as ethnic food, but more of a product that we incorporate in the everyday, right? That's when we win. Like, think about this, right? Would you call pizza ethnic food? Not really.
No, because it became American or Americanized, right?
Exactly, right? Or even if I think about like lasagna, right? Like some
Mhm.
people would argue that that's not even ethnic anymore, right? But then you think about jamon or soup dumplings or
Mhm.
tacos or paneer, all those like ethnic signature dishes from other cultures. Still, it's not taking that strong a presence just yet. Now, of course, for us, that means for Spanish food, we really wanted to kind of hopefully the goal is to make it such a staple, right, within your daily consumption that you actually not just consume it as a kind of a special occasion, but really use it on a daily basis.
That's a really interesting perspective, and I'm curious, what is the, perspective from vendors that you're using in Spain, knowing that you're bringing this to the States and also your family background? I'm curious of just how they're perceiving that.
Yeah, they love it. I mean, they see it as a very interesting project, and of course, in the early days, they all raised their eyebrows a little bit. It's like, what, like some Chinese kids wanted to come in and
Bringing it to the States.
yeah, to America, like what
Mhm.
do they know about jamon? What you know about jamon? Like, and so everybody's a little skeptical in the early days, right? But I think once we, kind of did our pitch, right, in terms of
Right.
kind of our mission, that we are not just bringing meats, we bring a piece of Spain to the world, or to the world stage, in this case in the US. I think the eyes lit up, and for us it's a great honor, like, look, Spain, and I'm sure, either you or many of your listeners have been in Spain. It's a wonderful country,
Mhm.
it's a very warm country, very it receives everybody with open arms, and at least that's how we felt, right? That when we moved there, it was home right away, and we adopted. I still think of myself very much as American, as Chinese, as Spanish. Like, it's kind of like a mixture of all three. But Spain gave me a lot of my childhood, and food or charcuterie was a big part of it. So to be able to take that banner and wave that banner and represent this category, in our own way, in a stage like the States, it's a great honor. I don't want to sound too what's the word I'm looking for? Too pitchy, I guess. But
Mhm.
we literally are standing on the shoulders of giants that came before us. Like, there's so many good farmers and families and just history behind jamon. And I won't go into too much details there. Jamon or cured meats in general that it really is an honor to be able to represent the category here in the States. So,
It's really cool too, because your grandparents did something similar in the
yeah,
sense of opening up restaurants and then fusing local ingredients. And then this is like the next interpretation of that.
it's huge, right? Because we always dream about following our grandparents or parents' steps, right? In terms of, starting our own brands, it's our own business, but it's something that we're really passionate about. And that's why, when it comes to food, specifically or Spanish food, we just felt that, it was, again, we spend a lot of time thinking about what our next project will be, and we will always come back to Spanish food, just because that's something that we desire so much, in the States, and couldn't get to it. And so by marrying that personal desire with kind of what our grandparents did back
Right.
in in Spain, I think we're still growing, which comes with a lot of growing challenges. But as far as having fun, we're having a blast.
I love it. And it's funny too, when I was saying that I lived in China, one of my classmates was from Spain, and she would always talk about Spanish food and
Yes.
particularly the cured meats.
Yes.
So your story too, I'm like, oh my gosh, just like I've heard her talk with so much pride about the food from where she's from, and that was like what she was really just looking forward to when she went back to Spain after studying abroad. She's like, I just want to eat a
No,
charcuterie.
no, it's
I
so true.
remember, like, that was 15 years
So
ago, and
true.
I still remember that so vividly. That was like what she was really just looking. She had a great time, but that's what she was looking forward to. So I thought that was just so funny that you're saying that too.
And through food, it's when you get to know people.
Totally.
That's why, we never say, hey, our success is selling more meat. Our success, it's when we actually can share with the world what we are able to enjoy from Spain, right? The little moments that we had over food.
Hmm.
And this is true with many cultures, but I feel like
Right.
food, it's such a vehicle, to bring people together, enemies, friends, family, like
Yeah.
everybody can come to the table over a meal. Everybody has to eat,
Hmm.
right? And if you have the right vehicle, it's such a good opening, and I say this, with a story. It's so we celebrate now Thanksgiving in my house, right? Because my wife's just American, and I enjoy very much the tradition of Thanksgiving, um in terms of people coming together and sharing a meal
Right.
together, and just catch up. And you would not believe that, before I had a ham on my counter. So again, for those of you who know about how to eat the Spanish ham, you can eat them sliced, which we already prepackaged them, and you can just buy 2 ounces slice, and you just open them up and eat it. Or you can buy a whole leg, put it into your counter, and slice them. The leg is anywhere between 15 to 17 pounds. It will feed about 40 people at once if you wanted to carve it all out. But it's very barbaric. I mean, it's like, it's like this huge leg that you just like flop it on top of your counter, and then little by little just carve it. And it's something very soothing about carving. But anyways, I won't go into details there. But you will never imagine the amount of attention that it can track as an opening conversationer when you have one leg sitting on your counter, and everybody that comes in for Thanksgiving just surrounds you around the leg and having a glass of wine, having a conversation, and just eating a little bit of that leg. So my point is, it's a vehicle. It's a vehicle for you to share a story with your loved ones, when they come, whether sharing a dinner or whether it's just coming for a snack, whatever it is. It's such a place where people can come together, and that's kind of what we're hoping for, right? Is that we enjoy that when we were in Spain. Food will always
Hmm.
bring us together, jamon or chorizo or charcuterie in specific. So that's kind of what we want to bring to the States.
And I got that too from your social. I mean, the first line in your bio is about gathering people.
Yep.
And that really spoke to me too. I used to be a partner and a creative director of a restaurant. And a big part of the ethos was that it was a community-based restaurant. We had a community table. And
Nice.
working on that project, I can also just say the power of bringing people together with food. And your brand is doing that. One last question. I could
Yeah.
talk to you forever. I really love what you're doing.
Thank you.
What piece of advice would you give someone who's just starting out? They have an idea, they have a passion, which sounds like is a huge part of your drive. What would you say to someone who's just starting out? Maybe they want to do more, high quality, a bit more small batch, but they want to be more strategic. They really want to do it right. What piece of advice would you give that founder?
I love that question, Kelly. I love that question because I think that goes in line with the advice that I would give. And that's actually, it's an advice that we keep giving to ourselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think we live in a world, especially in business or brand building, that going fast means, or not going fast means that you're failing. And not scaling fast enough means that you won't make it. And what that does is that it forces us to get into such a bad behavior, I feel, that you're going out there at the very early stage to raise venture funding, that you are focused more on getting the funding that you need versus building a sustainable business, right? So the advice that I would give, and there's a lot, and we can talk about this forever because it's such a good
I
topic.
feel like that could be a part 2 of all your
Oh my God.
advice.
Oh my God. I can bore you to death in terms of all the lessons learned. But I think go slow, it's not a bad thing. Go slow, right? And you use the word sustainable, right? You use the word small batch.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. I would argue that's necessary in
Yeah.
the early days, right? And don't go out there and chase Vogue. Don't go out there and chase Bon Appetit. Don't chase that too early, because the reality is that, look, there's a lot of kinks you have to work out.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody has all the solutions, the early stages of their brand. Nobody does. I think whoever tells you that, they're either arrogant or they live in the limbo. Like it's just,
Yep.
it's so
Or they're
you
full of
have
shit.
exactly. So you have to allow yourself time to work the kinks, whether
Yeah.
it's marketing or whether it's supply chain or whether it's hiring. There's so much things that you got to figure that out. So take your time and build a solid foundation. Scaling will come. Again, Mercado, it's very small. I mean, very, very young still. And we're still growing. We've seen some great KPIs, the early days, but we just, and my co-founder does a great job reminding of this. Asking how to scale at this stage of our brand, it's the wrong question to ask, right? Like, sure, we keep that in mind just because we don't want to be a hobby, right? This has to be a
Right.
brand and business at the end of the day. So, if this was a hobby, let's not even talk about any of that stuff. But
Right.
But at the same time, the question is more, how do we build a sustainable platform? How do we build a sustainable brand? That's how you will be able to scale. If you want to scale too early, you're going to end up burning a lot of cash in marketing. You're going to end up burning a lot of cash in quick, potentially bad hirings. There's a lot of things that can trip you if you want to go too quickly. I've seen brands that took funding too early and got into this fundraising cycle that basically they become professional fundraisers versus professional brand owners, right? And I
I've
didn't
seen
want
that
that.
too many times.
Way too many. So and look, Mazel Tov, there's some people that wants that. Great. That you do you, right? But I think for us, we didn't want that for ourselves. So I think that's probably one advice that's very relevant for us currently, and I will give to an entrepreneur that's trying to start something. It's take your time and don't feel like because you're not seeing results fast that you're failing. You're not.
Thank you for saying that, because so many of the founders that I work with on their brand strategy are first-time founders. They, by and large, are women founders, first in their family to be a founder, probably juggling kids, spouse, life, right? Bootstrapping. And they put this pressure on themselves to be like these huge mega brands that have millions and millions of dollars, teams. Like, you can't compare yourself to that.
No.
Let's build something that feels sustainable to you, that you actually could be consistent with, and you could deliver a cohesive experience that will build, that will scale. So thank you for saying that, because I'm going to send this recording to all of my clients when they hit that wall. I'm like, listen to Erin. I know you hear me say it, but like, listen to Erin. And also, based off of your experience and working for Fortune 500 companies, and the fact that you're still coming back to that, I think that also speaks volumes of how solid that advice is, because you've seen it from so many different perspectives and you're still coming back to that piece of advice. So thank you for saying that. I think
Of
that needs
course.
to be spoken about more. And it means a lot that you just shared that.
No, I couldn't agree more. And then last thing to that point, just to add to that, and I promise the last thing I say, balance. Balance.
Mm,
You use the word balance, is that, look, are you really, and again, this is a little bit of a cheap shot, because of course, we are where we are, so we can afford to ask some philosophical questions like the one I'm about to propose.
that's fair.
But think about, like, what is the version of yourself as an entrepreneur you want to be, right? Because the reality is that, let's say you made it. Let's say you create a mega gigantic brand, but you created no balance. You're not spending enough time with your loved ones. You're not taking care of yourself. You're not eating well. You're not sleeping well. Is that worth it? And again, it's a little bit of cheap shot. That's why I said, because I not always had the right balance. I'm the first one to recognize that.
Same. I'm raising my hand for anyone listening.
Yes.
Same. Mm-hmm.
So, but in hindsight, looking back, it's like, yeah, I built a very successful brand life in general, right? But I give up a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And is it worth it? I think that's very personal to each person. But
Yep.
I think we cannot lose sight of balance. I mean, I'm at the point where I see a lot of colleagues that, are entrepreneurs, that build marvelous brands, build a marvelous career, not just brands, but in the different professions. But because of the decisions they made of not having that balance, they're paying for it in a number of different ways. So that's kind of one last thing I
Yeah.
would say to a young entrepreneur or first-time entrepreneur, is that don't lose sight of that. Don't lose sight of balance. And yes, you have to have the grit and chase your dreams. We
Mm-hmm.
all do. That's what makes us entrepreneurs, and that's what makes the end so sweet. Not the
Yeah.
end, that I guess the journey is so sweet.
Totally.
But don't lose sight of the balance.
Again, thank you for saying that, because I too know what it feels like not to have the balance. And I've had the privilege of being behind the scenes of very, very successful people who did not have balance, and seeing the outcome of that. And so I also am starting to advocate more of like, whatever balance looks like for you, but just find what is that. So you are filling yourself up and you're not just grinding, and then you're unhappy at the end of the day, even though you have quote unquote success. So I think this is also the new era of entrepreneurship. I think we've kind of seen the wave and we're like, okay, hold up. We can
Yeah.
have a little bit of both and still be
Yeah.
successful and enjoy life, right? And going back to like food and beverage, and having the time and space and just mental bandwidth to be present with people that you love and have interesting conversations. Now, for me, that's part of success. Right.
100%.
And so
100%.
I love that you touched upon that. So, Erin, thank you again for coming on. This was such a great conversation, totally filled up my cup. And I just want to thank you again. Everyone, go check out Erin's brand. Where can people shop just before I let you go?
Yeah, so you can shop through mercadofamous.com. That's our website. Or you can follow us on Instagram with the handle of Mercado Famous.
Amazing. And I'll put all the links and all the show notes on my site. Thank you again, Erin, for coming on. And thank you everyone for listening to Emerging Brands Podcast with Kelly Bennett. And I'll see you on the next episode.